Welcome, everybody. It's nice to have you here. And today I'm going to share with you a message about uh, the likely reason why you may not be getting the results that you want in your life. And so, in order to get to that point of having that make sense, as usual, I'm going to cover some of the basics. And, for those who have been here before, then it's good to have an open mind, to come with an empty bowl, as they say, because if you're coming with a full bowl, then you can't really receive. And if you think you already know the things, then you're blocking yourself from actually receiving them. So the basics are very important because actually that's all that we're really usually just struggling with is the basics. So if you are not getting the results that you want in your life, whether that's spiritually or emotionally or mentally or materially, whatever that might be, whether it's the finances or the health or the relationships or whatever it is, then uh, it's because there's some fundamental misunderstanding or mistake that's being made. And so having a review of the basics is very important. So what is the overarching intention of this meeting? I like to give that at the start so that you can be clear about whether this is right for you, because I don't want to waste your time. So the overarching intention here is self-realization, because the fundamental problem is ignorance of who you are, what your powers are, and what your relationship with reality is. When you have that knowledge, when you know who you are, you know what your powers are, and you know what your relationship to the reality is, then it kind of solves everything, if you think about it. Everything else that we're doing is inefficient when it comes to trying to get fulfillment. So the overarching intention here is self-realization, because that's the real fulfillment. That's what gives you what you really want. And so that's the large context of what is being presented here. Now, uh, self-realization is something that often, I think, is not well defined. And so I just want to take a moment to be clear about what that means. I already kind of just did. I said it's about knowing who you are, knowing what your powers are, and knowing what your relationship with reality is. And so when you don't know that, that's called ignorance, and that's what is the cause of all suffering. So if you just take a look in your life, you can see that all of the suffering that you experience is due to ignorance. You don't know who you are. You don't know what you want. You don't know what your powers are. You don't know what your relationship with reality is. And so you struggle. You try to solve your problems, not even knowing what the problems are. Therefore, you're going about it terribly inefficiently, and you're getting not so great results. Then you feel powerless and frustrated, which just spins into a vicious cycle. And this leads people to all kinds of terrible conclusions, like life is suffering, there's no way out, it's all awful, all these kinds of things. But that's obviously not a good or helpful way to understand reality, because it just keeps you stuck in that same cycle that is producing the suffering that is causing you to think like that. So, uh, knowing who you are, knowing what your powers are, knowing what your relationship with reality is, and also knowing what you really want is the way to reverse that vicious cycle, turn it into a virtuous cycle of self-knowledge, which then is about self-empowerment. It's about also then thereby recognizing your innate divine qualities of peace, wholeness, freedom, abundance, happiness, health, etc. And the ultimate realization there is that who I am is Sat Chit Ananda, as is traditionally described, which is to say that you know that you are the totality, you are bliss, you are happiness itself, unconditionally. So if any of that doesn't sound good to you, then I guess this would not be the right place for you. But if it does sound good to you, then I guess you're in the right place. So then the question is, how do we get there? How do we get from where we are which is ignorance, to self-realization, which is the total fulfillment. And what I propose, which is the path that I'm offering, or that I can offer guidance on, is not the same path that everybody else is offering. So that's also helpful to understand that there are many paths in life. And so this is I don't know if it's a unique path, but it is a distinct path. There's not just one path. So the reason I'm mentioning that is because if you think that there's only one path, then you can unnecessarily confuse yourself and struggle in ways that you don't need to, because you'll be trying to put together some things that don't quite fit. What I mean by that is that oftentimes uh, there are things that are presented because they're paths that are being presented, paths of success in life, of attainment, of whatever it is that a person is interested in. And if you think if you don't understand what the context is, if you don't know what the path is and where it's leading and what's possible with that path, then and what the possible pitfalls are with that path, then you are setting yourself up for a difficult time. So here I want to be as clear with you as I can about what the path is, and what the attainments are. So I've already outlined what the attainments are. The attainment is self-realization. The path to that is a distinct path, as I've already said. So some paths to self-realization are paths of what I call top-down, meaning it's all just about transcendence. So those paths say just meditate, and if you keep meditating and you meditate over and over and over and over and over, then eventually you will completely transcend the mundane. Therefore, you will no longer have any problems. You'll only be that Sat Chit Ananda. You'll just be bliss. And that sounds very attractive, as it should, I assume. The problem with it is that that path is not appropriate for most people, because certainly not for you, because you have internet access, which means that you have bills that you pay, which means that you're dealing with finances, which means you're living in this world. So you're clothing yourself, feeding yourself, maybe you have a family. So that path of the top-down, exclusively top-down path, is the path of renunciation, the path of transcendence. And so that's not going to be a very good path for you, because, as I've already suggested, you are in this world. And so the problem there is that you have things that you're trying to manage in this world, like just keeping your body alive. And as long as you have those attachments, which you do and you will continue to have so long as you're living in this world, then you cannot completely transcend until you have resolved those other things. And denying them or rejecting them or ignoring them is not an effective way, for most of us at least, to resolve them. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if you struggle with finances, for example, or if you struggle with basic material security, then that is something that is weighing on you. It's a stress. It's an ongoing stress, and it keeps bothering you. So guess where your attention is? It's on that. Your attention is not in that moment on oneness. If your attention was only exclusively on oneness, then by definition, you would already be there. You would already have attained that. But your attention is not exclusively on oneness. So if you have a meditation practice and you experience oneness, sometimes intermittently, whether that's daily or weekly or monthly or hourly, that's great. It's fantastic. But the problem is, what about the rest of the time? And if you tell the truth, the rest of the time is most of the time. And so most of the time, your attention is getting sucked into these other things, these mundane concerns of finances, relationship, health, etc. And as I'm pointing out, because you are still living in this world, you have not renounced it. You are not living in a cave in the Himalayas, and you're not likely to anytime soon. And even if you were to, chances are you would fail at it. Then you need a different path, one that is not just that, because that top-down approach won't work for you, or it's unlikely to work for you. It's maybe it works for some, but it's rare. It's rare because it requires those would be those rare individuals who have come into this lifetime with all of that lower stuff completely resolved, and they just had a few tiny little things to clear out, and then they were able to clear it out, and then they're just living in what's called sahaja samadhi, which means that they're living in a state of complete oneness and wakefulness all the time in the waking state, that they can operate in this waking state without getting sucked down into those lower concerns. But that's not most people. That's not likely to be you. So that's why I point out that that path of top down exclusively is not usually very effective for people. In fact, what it does is it produces a increased contrast that can be very painful. What I mean by that is that if you have a meditation practice or whatever kind of practice you have where you regularly are able to experience oneness, as long as you're not cleaning up the more mundane stuff, then you're increasing your contrast of what's possible. So you, on a daily or hourly or minutely basis, you can experience that transcendence where there's no problem, where there's no separation, which is blissful. It's wonderful. But then you fall back down into a state of separation, and that contrast between oneness and separation is so stark that it can be very painful, largely because you haven't filled in the gaps, the missing knowledge about how all of this works and who you really are at all levels. And so then you feel powerless, frustrated, depressed, and all those kinds of things. So, and I'm speaking from experience here, so I recognize it very well because I've done that, been there, done that for many years. So I know how painful and uncomfortable that is, and I know ultimately it really doesn't work. So what I'm proposing, what I offer, is a top-down, bottom-up approach, which is an integrated approach. So bottom-up is what most people who are not attempting top-down are doing in their life. They're just trying to ascend slowly, bit by bit. And if you can manage that without any top-down at all, then good to you. But I'm guessing that most people here, whether you know it or not, it's too late for that for you, because you've already had some kind of experience of awakening. And again, you might not even know that that's happened for you. You might have been born that way. However it has happened to you, it has almost certainly happened to you, because it's very, I would say, so unlikely as to be impossible that you would be here otherwise. Because the stuff that's coming out of my mouth just absolutely wouldn't make any sense to you otherwise. Because otherwise it just sounds like nonsense. If this was broadcast on broadcast television, nobody would listen because it doesn't make any sense. But it makes some sense on some level to you, in part because you've had these higher faculties awakened. But you've got to clean up a lot of the lower stuff. And so the point here is that we need both. We need to have an intelligent approach to working bottom up, and we need to integrate the top down in a way that fills in the gap in between, so that we can live an integrated life of self-knowledge, self-empowerment, and then we can achieve our ultimate goal of self-realization, which is to say total fulfillment, peace, happiness, unconditional love, and abundance in the smoothest, most expedient way possible. So here I offer that we want to, mostly I focus on the middle stuff, which is to say the laws of reality, how the manifest world works, so that we can work intelligently in order to fill in the gap between the extremes of the top and the bottom. That will give us the confidence so that we can work with our powers intelligently, know who we are, and achieve success at all levels so that we can release the stuff that's been bogging us down. And so this gets to the main topic for today, which is what it is that has been holding you back from achieving success. So if you've been here before, then you've probably heard me talk about the power of attention. If not, I'll mention it briefly now anyway, so that you can understand how this works. So attention is the main power that is the main driving power of creation. So all of experience is founded upon this power of attention. So that the basis of reality is consciousness. You are that. That is oneness. Oneness is consciousness. And I liken this to, because it's an apt way of understanding it, it's like having a dream. So when you dream, if you lie down in your bed and you go to sleep and then you begin to dream, then you dream a whole dream universe peopled with dream characters and all the dream places and events and so forth. And it seems like distinct things happening, many separate beings and places and events taking place within that dream universe. But when you wake up, of course, hopefully it becomes clear that all of that was happening in you only. So it was not separate. There was no separation there at all. It was actually only you as consciousness dreaming. So the substance of all of the dream, including all the dream characters and the dream locations and the dream events, is all that one consciousness that you are. It's the same now in this waking state. The waking state is another dream. And so everything that's happening here is that one consciousness, but it is manifest just like a dream as a multiplicity. So so this one consciousness, so it's the same as in a dream. Okay, so how does the dream appear? How does the multiplicity appear out of a singularity of one undivided consciousness? And it's about attention. So the attention is when we could say that that singularity of consciousness is begins to be directional. So think about a coin. A coin is a singularity. There's only one coin. You cannot have a one-sided coin, but the coin, although it's one entity, it has two sides. Okay, so there's not, but each side is not distinct. They exist as part of the same oneness of the coin. So the coin is polarized as these two sides. Well, it's like that with consciousness. It becomes polarized. And so attention is one side of the coin, so to speak, and the other side is the intention, which is to say whatever it is that the attention is focused on. And so that's the fundamental power of creation. That's fundamentally all that's going on, actually. And so it's just whatever your attention is on that is what is. So that's basically all that's going on. But then it gets increasingly complex as it becomes increasingly differentiated. But that's the fundamental thing that's going on. So, so as I often say, you want to get clear on you want to harness and master your power of attention. What's happening presently is you don't have that mastery over your power of attention, so your attention goes all over the place. And that's just out of habit because you've trained your attention, not knowing you don't remember having done this for the most part, but you have trained your attention to do exactly what it does, which is to go all over the place. So it flits from one thing to the next. And as a result of that, you're having the experience that you're having. And you feel disempowered and frustrated because you don't seem to be, you don't seem to have the power over your attention or your experience. But you can, you certainly have that power. It's just that it's been relegated to your unconscious. It's just a habit. All of the ways that the attention is directed is habit. But you can regain conscious control. And one important way of doing that is to be clear about what you actually want. Because how many times, just think about this, how many times have you found yourself kind of woken up out of a daze to realize that you were just sort of following some train of thought where your attention was just going from one thing to the next to the next to the next, and none of that was actually what you wanted. None of it was fulfilling. I mean, this happens all the time for most of us, especially if you're using your phone or you're using social media, because those things are designed to produce exactly that, because they are actually designed to suck your energy. So, because your attention is your energy, it is your power. So whatever you put your attention on, it gets your energy. Think about that. So this is happening all the time where your attention is just getting sucked into things because you have lost your conscious control over it. And one very useful way in which you can start to regain your conscious control over that is to actually get clear about what you want. Because if you're not clear about what you want, then you don't have a good reason to focus your attention. Otherwise, your attention just is going to continue to flip from here to there, and it will only get worse. It's only gotten worse, so it's just going to continue to get worse until you take responsibility and start to change that. And I'm proposing one very powerful way to do that is get clear on what you want. So if you've been here before, you've heard me say that. And so hopefully you started that process of giving some attention each day consciously to what do I want. And I have proposed in the past, and I'll propose again now briefly, that one very powerful, effective way to do that is to start out with what you don't want. So what is it that most pains you? What hurts you the most? Because that's a really good clue as to what you truly want. Because you could spend a lot of time thinking about, oh, maybe I want the big screen TV, and maybe I mean, I know that's very 1990s. I stopped paying attention in the 1990s, so I don't know what people want these days, but I want the big screen TV, I want the Lamborghini, I want this, I want that. But most of those things you don't want. Most of those things you don't really care about. They're just placeholders, distractions, and they're fundamentally borrowed. They're not really yours. You borrowed them from advertisers or from your parents or from teachers or spouses or children or whoever you borrowed them from. But the things that you really want are the things that you feel most pained by not having. And so those are the things that I suggest you start with, is notice what are the things that over and over and over you're experiencing pain with in your life. And so it kind of boils down to it's kind of like health, creative stuff, creative expression, finances, and relationship. Those are kind of the main things. And within that, there may be a variety of ways that it expresses, but it's always kind of comes down to those categories. So you might have, for you, it might be one of those things, two of those things, multiple of those things, but just see what are the things that hurt you the most, where you're experiencing ongoing pain, and then find out what's the opposite of that. And that's what you really want. So if you experience health challenge, then what you really want is obviously health, right? Or we could say wholeness, peace. If you experience, ongoing chronic anger problems in relationship, then what you really want is peace or happiness or freedom, health in relationship. So you get clear on what it is you actually want, and then because you have established for yourself that you really want it, I mean, you really, really, really want it, that you'll not be happy without it, then that can be a strong motivator for you to start to actually consistently give attention to it. because when you start that process, what you'll see is that that's really the main problem in your life. I mean, everything else, like I said, all the other desires are placeholders. You think, oh, I want this gadget, I want that uh, car, I want that lover, I want this thing, that thing, the other thing. They're placeholders because you haven't looked deeply enough to find out what you really want. And you could just keep chasing after those things, and then you get the thing, and then it doesn't really fulfill you, and you move on to the next thing, and that doesn't really fulfill you, and you move on to the next thing, and that doesn't fulfill you, and you just keep doing that until one day you have a midlife crisis or whatever, and then you go into a really difficult time in your life when you can fall into very unhelpful ways of thinking and perceiving, but you can help yourself to avoid all of that if you start now and get clear on what you really want. Because when you see that what you really want is the only thing that holds any possibility of anything approximating real fulfillment, that should be a strong motivator for you to actually consistently give your attention to that. So hopefully that much is clear. Now, if you are doing that consistently, using the advice that I have given previously, which is to say, you just give your attention to that every day. Visualize it, feel it, imagine it. Because when you're doing that, you're practicing establishing that as a reality in your imagination, which is the foundation of all experience, which is the foundation of all of reality. So if you do that consistently, then it's just a law. It has to manifest outwardly. Or at the very least, we could say it has to resolve to your complete satisfaction. And if that involves it needing to manifest outwardly, then it will. But in any case, when you do that consistently, eventually it just has to happen that you will experience complete satisfaction and resolution on that matter. And then it will no longer hurt you and you will feel good. Has to happen. There's no other way. If you think that there's going to be some other way, you're fooling yourself, because this is just fundamentally how things work. There is no other way around it. Now, with that said, if you are doing that consistently and you are not getting the results, then you might wonder why, and that's what I want to talk about today. So in order to explain that, then I want to provide a basic framework for understanding all of this, and that is to say that all of this is energy. And so I've already said as much, right? This is all consciousness, and consciousness and energy are interchangeable. They're the two sides of one coin. They're the same thing, consciousness and energy. So all of this is energy, and all energy is movement by definition. Okay, so it's all movement. And what differentiates one form of energy from another is just the frequency with which it is vibrating or moving. So that might sound sort of esoteric, but which I suppose it is, but it's also a demonstrable fact that everything that you experience through your senses and thoughts. There's nothing outside of that. So just check that out and notice the truth of that. That everything that you experience through your senses and through thought. So if you think that you're experiencing something outside of you, that's a thought. But what you're actually experiencing is that thought, which is an inner thing, and the sensory data, which is also inner. Physiologically, there's a correlate to this. This is also true. So even at a physiological level, even if we were to say that there might be some kind of external reality, we could speculate that there is, but physiologically, you never come into contact with it, ever. It's all happening within your own brain. So no matter how you look at it, metaphysically, physically, it's always comes down to the same thing, which is that it's all subjective. It's all happening internally. It's all within you. So it's only your thoughts and your senses. And your thoughts and your senses are all energy, and they can all be measured in terms of frequency. So what differentiates one color from another color is the frequency at which it's vibrating. That's why red is red and blue, is because they're vibrating at different frequencies. And that can be measured with the proper instruments. You have a spectrometer, I think is what it's called. You can measure the frequency at which light is vibrating. Same is true of sound. What differentiates one pitch from another pitch is the frequency. If you're a musician, then you would know this to be true. If you have a standard tuning is a 440A. 440 is 440 hertz, which means 440 vibrations or oscillations per second. And that is what is the standard tuning for the uh, tone that is called an A. And so this is true of all things. They all experience is frequency. So when you understand this as the context, then you can start to understand that what you're really wanting to do is you're wanting to change your frequency if you're not liking the experience that you're having. So if you're vibrating out of habit at a frequency of lack, as an example, and that hurts you, then you want to change that to a frequency of abundance. And that's absolutely doable. There's no question about it. I promise you, you can do it. Anybody can do it. It's not only can you, you must. It's a requirement. That's why you're here, is to gain that mastery. You have to do it. You won't be satisfied until you can, or rather until you do, because you already can, but you won't be satisfied until you do it. So that's the basic equation, is that we're dealing with energy. Now, if you keep putting your attention consistently on the frequency that you want, then you're training yourself to hold your attention on that frequency, which means that becomes your actual perception, which means it becomes your experience. Remember that all experience is actually inner experience. We project it outwardly, but there is no outer. Actually, there's only inner. It's just a projection in imagination that says it's outer. So all experience is actually inner. And so whatever you hold your attention on, whatever frequency you hold your attention on, that becomes your total experience. It's again, it's just a fundamental law. So it can't be otherwise. It's just how it actually works. When you put your attention on that consistently and hold your attention on that, that is what you experience. So that's the name of the game. That's how it's actually working. So this business of getting clear on what you want and then practicing putting your attention on that is so that you can do that. It's so that you can start holding your attention on the frequency that you want. And when you practice that consistently, you get better at it, which means that you start to have that experience. Now, why then might you not get the results? And when you understand this context, then the answer starts to become pretty obvious. It's because you have a habit of putting your attention on other things. So what are those other things that you have a habit of putting your attention on? And I will suggest to you that probably the number one thing that you have a habit of putting your attention on is fear. Now, fear is a very low vibration. It's about as low as it can get. So when you put your attention on fear, I can guarantee you, you're not anywhere in the ballpark of the things that you want, because the things that you want are all higher vibration. So peace, harmony, abundance, freedom, happiness, health, wholeness, those are all high vibration, which is sort of the other extreme. So when you are putting your attention on fear, as I say, you're as far as you can get from what you want. But if you are like most of us, you have a very regular habit and a very strong habit of putting your attention on fear. So then hopefully you can start to see why you're not getting the results that you want, because you practice for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour a day, putting your attention on what you want, But then for the other 23 hours plus, you're putting your attention on fear. So why do you think then that you're getting the experience that you're getting? It starts to become pretty clear, right? It's because it's just about practice. You're very good at putting your attention on fear because you just keep practicing it over and over and over and over and over. And you can get frustrated and throw your hands up and say it doesn't work. But it's working perfectly. The law always works. You just have to understand what's actually going on. You're putting your attention on fear, therefore you're getting that experience. You're getting all of the experiences that vibrate in harmony with that, which is to say, all the things that you don't want. So there's that. Now, there are obviously other kinds of things that we also are in the habit of putting our attention on. Fear is probably the number one thing that for most of us, we're in the habit of putting our attention on. By the way, this all might sound like bad news, but there's good news here. I'm going to tell you exactly what you can do to change this. So don't dismay. But first, I have to make it clear what's going on. And the reason I'm bringing all this up today is because I meet with a lot of people. I meet with people all day long, and I see that this is the two things that I'm talking about today. So one I've already talked about, which is the attention going to fear. And then the second thing, which I'm about to talk about, these are the two main habits that people have that keep them from getting the results that they want. I mean, the other thing is not having clarity about what they want. So getting clarity about what you want is very, very, very important because otherwise you're not able to consistently redirect your attention to something that is actually desirous to you. And therefore, changing that habit of putting the attention on fear or other low vibrational states is much more challenging. So first, I very strongly encourage you to get clear on what you want. But then when people have done that much and they're not getting the results, I see that these are the next two main reasons why. And so I go over this over and over with people, but I figure, hey, I'll just tell everybody about this so that then you'll know exactly what you can do so that you can solve this problem for yourself. And that way, if you decided that you wanted to schedule a session with me, we wouldn't have to use the time going over these basics because you'd already have some practice with this. So we'd be able to refine some things at a higher level. So that's the first. The first one is this habit of putting attention on fear. The second one is these, and it could be fear, but it could be any kind of low vibrational state, anger, jealousy, resentment, guilt, shame, these kinds of things. Okay, and then the associations that trigger that. And so we have these associations that we use that trigger those habits, those bad habits of putting our attention on those low vibrational states. And I refer to these as negative energy cords. So we form energy cords with people and situations. If you don't like that term, you can that's the term I'm going to use, but you can just translate that in your head as just associations, energetic associations, emotional associations, where there are certain people or events or memories or thoughts that we have associated that trigger our habit of putting our attention on these low vibrational states. I refer to these as negative energy cords. And I'm going to share with you a process by which you can help yourself to stop doing that, and also how you can stop putting your attention habitually on fear. And when you do these things regularly, your life will change, guaranteed. It has to. Why? Because I've already explained how things are working, right? If you understand that it's fundamentally an equation of energy, that whatever you put your attention on, that's what you experience. And if you're putting your attention on high vibrational energy consistently, you have that experience, which you find to be pleasurable and desirable. And if you consistently put your attention on low vibrational states, then that's the experience that you have, which you consider to be unpleasant, to put it mildly, right? So clearly, I hope it's clear that I hope I've done my work and I've established pretty clearly what's going on and made abundantly clear that what you want to do is you want to stop that habit of putting attention on low vibrational states, and you want to then be able to more consistently put your attention on high vibrational states. And as you do, you're training your attention to stay where you want it, and thereby you consistently have the experiences that you want. So with all that as the context, now I'll share with you some very simple and very effective, powerful exercises that you can do that will help you to train yourself to stop putting your attention on those low vibrational states. So we'll start with a practice that will help you with the fear. So fear is, so just see that unless you're extraordinarily uncommon, then I can guarantee that you fall back into fear quite often, and that fear will manifest as a fear of I'm not lovable, I don't have enough, I'm going to die, these kinds of things. So it can materialize, it can manifest in a variety of ways, but it's all fear. It's all a fundamental insecurity, a sense of I am not fundamentally powerful. I can be destroyed. I can lack. Something that I need can be taken away. So that's the basic underlying premise of fear. And like I say, unless you're extremely uncommon, then you have this, because it happens for everybody. If you don't think that that applies to you, then please let me know so that we can get that cleared up during the group coaching, because I can virtually guarantee that you do have that habit. And it's very important that you can see that, so that then you can start to apply the practice that will help you with that. So the practice that will help you with that, and I'm going to tell you the practice, but before I tell you what the practice is, I need to tell you that it's possible that you might think that couldn't work. You might think, oh, it's too simple, or that's too trivial, it won't work for me. I promise you that it works. I guarantee that it works. You just have to be willing to apply it consistently. And if you tell yourself that it won't work or it can't work, then you are very unlikely to actually apply it. So please have an open mind and be willing to actually put it into practice, because only when you put it into practice can you get the benefits. Remember what I said at the beginning. If you have a full bowl, if you think that you already know the answers, if you think that you know better, then unfortunately, you cannot receive what will actually help you. But if you're willing to set all of that aside, then you can actually receive what will help you. So I encourage you to empty your bowl, to be willing to be humble, just to admit that you're hurting and that you want to improve that. And that what I'm about to tell you is one of the most powerful things that you can do that will help you. It will absolutely radically change your life. You just have to be willing to practice it sincerely every day. So here's what it is. Practice safety. Remember, I said you're probably going to think that that couldn't work, or it couldn't work for you. But I promise you it will work. At first, because you're in the habit of practicing insecurity, because you practice that you are not safe, then practicing safety probably seems like a joke. Because, well, I can't practice safety because I have all the reasons why I'm not safe, right? You say, I can't practice safety because my safety is conditional. I'll only be safe when these conditions are met, right? I'll only be safe when I have the money. I'll only be safe when the corporations stop existing. I'll only be safe when 5G is not in existence. I'll only be safe when the psychic vampires are not around. I'll only be safe when the narcissists don't exist. I'll only be safe. Trust me, I've heard it all. All of these, and I've thought it all for myself. I know all of the stuff. I could go on, but I won't bore you. I promise you, whatever excuse you have for why it won't work for you, whatever things that you have come up with, whatever conditions you have come up with for yourself for why you cannot be safe now, those are included in the list of things that you want to abandon, because all of that is what holds you back. So you have to be willing to set aside all of the conditions and just be willing to practice safety now. So what does that look like? How would you actually do that? So I would recommend, it's very, very, very powerful if you have the ability to acknowledge a higher power. And if you're willing to open to relating to a higher power, call it what you will. Call it God, goddess, mother, father, the universe, higher self, whatever you want to call it. If you have the ability to do that sincerely, and most people do, a few people I've met are so resistant to it that it doesn't work for them, but most people can. So if you can, it will help you. If you cannot, then you can still succeed. But I'm just telling you that if you have the ability to open to a higher power, it will help you. It will boost the effect. And in that case, I strongly recommend that you invoke that higher power for protection. Okay, so that higher power, by definition, is superior, right? So it can do for you what you cannot do for yourself. You don't know how to protect yourself against the conditions that you've imagined are threats to you, but this higher intelligence, higher power can. So you want to, if you have the ability to do so, to invoke that higher power and say, I invoke this higher power for protection. Feel it, see it, imagine it. Because the truth is, remember, whatever you put your attention on, that is your experience. That is what reality is. So if you can imagine it, if you can practice it, it is true. It is real. And don't get hung up on thinking, oh, well, then is there any reality other than just what I'm imagining? Am I just all alone and all these kinds of unhelpful things? No, don't do that to yourself, because it's not, none of it is what you think anyway. No matter what you think, it's not that. So it's beyond that by definition, because your thoughts exist in that. So your thoughts can't capture it. So don't try, but just be willing to, if you can manage it, just be willing to turn it over to a higher power and to invoke it as your protector, trusting fully that it has that power to do so, because it does. Absolutely, unquestionably. That which has created everything has the power to protect, for sure. If it created everything, how could it not? Right? It can protect, for sure. All you have to do is be willing to invoke it and accept it. In either case, whether you can do that or not, then at the very least, just choose, I am safe. And of course, your mind is going to say, oh, I'm not safe. I've got all these reasons why I'm not safe. So just say, at least say, in my imagination, I am safe. Because in my imagination, I can imagine whatever circumstances or conditions are necessary for me to allow myself to feel safe. So at least in my imagination, I am safe. Now, practice that safety. So what does that mean? Well, notice when you're feeling fearful, when you're feeling insecure, what are you doing? See, most of us think, oh, well, it's just a thing that happens. Oh, I'm just overcome by fear. Fear is just happening to me, but it's nonsense. It's not true. Fear is not happening to you. You are doing fear. I promise you this is true. And this is very good news, because it means that you can cease doing fear. So what does the fear consist of? Just notice within yourself what the fear actually consists of in your actual experience. It's not conceptual, it's direct. How do you know you're afraid? I'll give you a big clue. You get tense. When you're fearful, you're tense. So how, well, I guess there's one exception to that. It's possible to be so fearful that you've gone into a complete collapse. Okay, in which case you need to actually choose to push yourself into a little bit of tension, a little bit of volitional tension, so that you can actually experience that, so that you can regain conscious control here. But for most of us, the vast majority of us, we don't get that far into things. And so we're experiencing that tension. And in either case, once you can experience that tension, then you practice safety by choosing to release it. The choice is very important. It's because, see, a lot of the time, people wait for it to go away, or they take something or do something that makes it go away, which means they don't actually recognize that they have the ability to choose to let go of the fear. That's why it's very, very, very important that you choose to let go of the fear. And maybe you can't let go of all of it. That's okay. Maybe you can only let go of 1% of it. That's fine. Because as you continue to practice day after day after day, you will get better at it, because it's a fundamental law. Whatever you put your attention on, that grows. It's just notice that that's true in your life of everything. Whatever you put your attention on consistently, you get better at it. So if you practice, or I should rather say, when you practice daily, releasing, relaxing out of the fear, letting go of the fear, which is another way of saying practicing safety, you get better at it, which means that you gain confidence in your ability to experience safety. Now, again, your mind might say, oh, it can't be that simple. That won't work for me. And if you believe that, then you won't do it, in which case it won't work for you. I can promise you, so long as you do it sincerely, consistently, it will work for you. It has to. It's like saying it won't work for me to put food in my mouth, chew it, and swallow it. It will work for you. It absolutely will. You just have to be willing to do it. And this is the case here. As long as you do this practice consistently, sincerely, every day, I promise you will get better at it. How much better, how fast? There are many variables. In general, probably quicker than you think. But you just have to be willing to do it sincerely, consistently. So that's the number one thing. Okay. Do that every day, at least once a day. If you want to do it more than once a day, that's excellent. I would say if you're going to do it once a day, it's difficult for me to say which is better, first thing in the morning or last thing at night. It's up to you. Do it one of those. If not, then do it whenever you do it. I don't care. Sometime is better than no time. If you do it while you're eating lunch, that's great. It's better than not doing it. But if you want optimal times for most people, first thing in the morning or last thing at night. If you can manage to do it twice a day, you'll get probably better results, in which case I recommend doing it once in the morning and once last thing at night. Especially if you struggle with difficult dreams, very, very, very important and helpful for that, to do it before you go to sleep. So that's the first practice. It will absolutely radically change your life when you do it consistently. Just do it. Take my word for it and put it into practice. It will really radically change your life for the better. It might take a few weeks before you start to notice real substantial differences. You might notice real substantial differences overnight. But again, it's just the consistent practice. You'll get better and better and better and better and better at it until it becomes second nature. And then automatically your attention goes to safety rather than fear. You might still get triggered into fear on occasion, but it will be much less often and much less strongly. And you'll spend much more of your time with your attention on safety. The habit of safety will become very strong. And again, when your attention is on safety, then you're vibrating at a higher frequency, which means that it's much more compatible with all the things that you want. Safety is very compatible with health, wholeness, happiness, peace, abundance, freedom, all of those things. So when you're vibrating more consistently at that frequency, then it's much easier for you to keep your attention on all the other things that you want. Okay, so that's the one thing. The second thing is this business of negative energy cords. So again, remember what I'm talking about here are these associations that you have formed, we've all formed them, that trigger activating negative states, low vibrational states, anger, resentment, guilt, shame, all those kinds of things, envy, jealousy. So again, the more time you spend in those negative states, the more practiced and familiar that becomes. So then it's more challenging for you to keep your attention on higher vibrational states. So you want to stop those habits. So it's this, we can form negative energy cords with anything, with situations, governments, organizations, events, all kinds of things. But it's let's say most common and most pronounced with people. Or let's say for most of us, we'll get the most bang for the buck if we start working with people. But know that in the long run, you can do this with anything. People, not only people, but situations, organizations, anything. But I'll give the examples in terms of people, because we form energy cords with people. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative. So in the long run, all of those attachments can end up being hindrances. But for the most part, it's only the negative energy cords that we want to clear up, because the positive energy cords tend to trigger positive states, right? So feelings of forgiveness, happiness, acceptance, love, these kinds of things. So they're generally not particularly problematic. It's just the attachments in the long run that become problematic, because then we still believe that we need those attachments in order to experience those states. So long term, we need to release them, but short term, it's not a problem for the most part. Can be in some cases, but usually not. So for the most part, I suggest focusing on the negative energy cords. The exception to that would be if if there's somebody who's deceased, or if there's somebody who's effectively deceased for you, that they're no longer in your life, let's say like an ex-spouse who's remarried, something like that, then it can, for the most part, it can be wise to just disconnect all the energy cords. But for most of the time, it's enough just to disconnect the negative energy cords with most people in most situations. Okay, so just notice you've got immediately, it should come to mind some people who you've got negative energy cords with, and notice that that's draining you all the time. So if there's somebody and they could be somebody who you live with, it could be somebody who you work with, it could be somebody who's dead, it could be somebody who is from the past. Time and distance don't matter here, because it's within you. Okay, so just notice it should come to mind immediately some people who you've got these with, because when you think about them, you feel guilty, you feel angry, you feel resentful, you feel victimized. And so just think about that for a moment, what that is doing to you, right? When you are holding on to that, and then anytime that consciously or subconsciously a thought of this person is triggered, then those negative energy cords are there draining your energy into these negative states, which means that you're practicing what you don't want, which is taking you away from what you do want. So you cannot afford to maintain those. They're dragging you down. So you have to see that. You have to see that it's very, 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 very important to practice letting them go. Well, I mean, to eventually just to let them go, but to practice letting them go until you gain total confidence in your ability to do that. Because then once you've done that, then it's very, very much easier for you to keep your attention, hold your attention on what you want. But again, just think about how many times throughout the day are you triggered into these low vibrational states by association. So if there's somebody you work with or who you live with, it's very important, right? Because you're in contact with this person all the time. And every time you come into contact with them, or every time you think about them, it's triggering these negative energy cords, which is putting you into these negative states, which means that you're not able to hold your attention on what you want. There's no good that comes from that. There's no benefit whatsoever that comes from negative energy cords. Does not help at all. In our ignorance, we usually somehow believe in some convoluted way that somehow offers some benefit. Like we think that if I don't hold on to this resentment, then somehow I'm going to be vulnerable to getting hurt. But do you hopefully see how insane that is? Because by holding on to the resentment, I am hurting. I'm hurting myself. By holding on to the resentment, I hurt myself. But usually, again, the convoluted thinking somewhere, somehow is, I need to hold on to this because if I let it go, then I will be vulnerable to getting hurt. Okay, so we need to be very clear with ourselves that there is no positive benefit whatsoever to these negative energy cords. They are only harmful. They hurt us and the other people, but mostly just focus on yourself. It just hurts you every time, every single time. There's no benefit at all. So then when you're clear on that, then you know for sure you need to practice letting it go. And I promise you that you can, and the more you practice it, the better you will get. So you will gain confidence. And because it hurts to maintain those negative energy cords, once you gain confidence in your ability to stop, you will find that you release them very quickly and then you cease to make them. So it doesn't usually take that long. Sometimes people think, oh, well, I've been doing this for my whole life. So am I going to have to practice this every day for the next 20 years before I can be free? No, it's usually not nearly that long. It's usually days, weeks, months at the most, as long as you practice it daily, consistently. So there are many ways that people successfully practice disconnecting negative energy cords. I am going to propose to you one way that I recommend, but you're welcome to do whatever works for you. The main thing is do it. Because if you don't practice, you won't get better at it. But if you do practice, for sure, you will get better at it. You just have to practice regularly. Sometimes people say, oh, well, I did that and it didn't work. Yes, but I can guarantee you didn't do it consistently. Because if you do it consistently, every day, sincerely, you will get the results. So, but if you say, oh, well, I did it once and it didn't work. Yeah, it makes sense that it wouldn't work because you've practiced forming the negative energy cord every day of your life. So you've gotten really good at that. Practicing disconnecting it once is pretty unlikely to work. It could work, but it's pretty unlikely that that's going to give you permanent results. So you just have to be, let's say, realistic. It's a funny word, but let's say realistic about it and just say, okay, I'm practically speaking, I'm willing to keep practicing until I get the results. Maybe I'm going to get overnight results. Maybe it's going to take me a week. Maybe it's going to take me a month. Maybe it will take me 6 months. It's unlikely, but even if it takes me 6 months, so be it, because the alternative is untenable, right? The alternative is to keep maintaining those negative energy cords, which keep you tethered to those negative states, which are not what you want. So here's the basic practice. Your intention is the most important part of this. Okay, so your intention is enormously powerful. So you want to resolve within yourself, I choose to disconnect these negative energy cords with such and such person now and forever. Now and forever. You want to be clear about that. I'm choosing to do that now and forever. Now in practice, you might find that you are challenged in that. Maybe you can disconnect it for a second and then you reconnect it. Okay, but you just want to keep telling yourself so that you're being clear with yourself about what your intention is. I'm choosing to disconnect these now and forever. I'm choosing that. Therefore, that's what I'm actually practicing. That's what I'm actually aiming for, and that's what I'm trusting is possible. Because if you set your sights too low, if you say I'm just choosing to disconnect it for 1 second, then that's all you're going to get. So you want to be clear. I'm choosing to disconnect this negative energy cord now and forever. Know that that's possible. Know that that's what your intention is. Okay. The second part of this is that you want to actually practice releasing it. So a lot of the times people are confused about how do I do this? And again, there are many different techniques that people use that can be effective. So if you find some other approach that is more effective for you, by all means do it. Some people are more visually oriented, in which case visualizing cutting a cord or whatever, that may be more effective for you. I guess because I'm biased toward being more kinesthetic, that I prefer for myself a more kinesthetic approach. So, and many people find it's very effective. So you try it on and see how it works for you. Feel in your body where you sense those negative energy cords. So everybody who I talk to about this, they're able to find that. So I'm pretty confident you can find it. You just notice when you feel that feeling of that negative state that's triggered by that negative energy cord, the depression, the anger, the resentment, the guilt, the shame, whatever it is, you feel it somewhere. Otherwise, you wouldn't consider it to be real. You wouldn't be bothered by it. You feel it. So notice where you feel it. And then that feeling is something that you're doing. Has to be. It's not, nobody else is doing it, right? You're doing it. You just didn't realize you were doing it. But now you can become aware that you're doing it, and then you can practice letting it go. So usually when I suggest this to people, straight away, they realize they can let it go. Maybe not all the way. Maybe just 5%, maybe 20%, maybe 1%, maybe 50%. Whatever you can do, just let it go that much, because if you keep practicing, you'll get better at it. For a small percentage of people, very small percentage of people, they say, well, I'm not really sure I can do that at all. In which case, I suggest intensify that feeling and then let it go. Sort of like you can make a fist and squeeze the fist and then let it go. You can do something very much like that with this feeling of this negative energy cord. You can intensify it so that you can really get a clear sense of it and then let it go. And again, you might not be able to let it go all the way, but you can let it go at least somewhat. And so as you practice that consistently daily, you'll get better at it. Okay, so that's parts 1 and 2. However you want to delineate it. Okay, the next part is to forgive. And sometimes most people are fine with this. Every once in a while, somebody says, oh, I don't know about that. Okay, so I want to be really clear. The forgiveness, you're forgiving yourself and the other person for all the wrongs, hurts, and misunderstandings and everything else that has bound you to this negative energy cord. The reason is because you are ready to be free. It's not to say that you think that the behavior was good, and it's not to say that you want more of it in your life. It's not because you're saying you're inviting more of that bad behavior into your life. It's because you're saying, I am ready to be free. I'm ready to be done. I'm ready to stop being tied to it. So I'm choosing to forgive myself and the other for everything for our greatest good. And if you are, again, if you have the ability to turn it over to a higher power, if that's within your framework of reality, then it's very powerful to do so, because you want to see that you have caused these problems to yourself because you have been trying to manage the unmanageable, right? You have been trying to manage this relationship. You've been trying to manage those situations, those events, those feelings, those experiences, those memories, all of that stuff. You've been trying to manage that with limited knowledge. And you have not been successful with that. So you're not likely to be successful with that. But when you're willing to turn it over to a higher power, who by definition has greater intelligence, greater knowledge, then finally you say, oh, I don't have to do that to myself anymore. I'm willing to turn it over to that higher power, which has the intelligence to produce the perfect healing for myself and the other person for our greatest good. That's the point here, is you're saying, I'm ready for freedom. I'm ready for peace. I'm ready for happiness. I'm ready for the healing. I haven't been able to do that, but I'm willing to turn it over to a higher power and accept that. Right? I'm willing to accept that healing. I don't have to do it. I'm willing to accept it for myself and the other person. But I no longer have to concern myself with what that looks like for the other person, right? I don't need that anything of that other person any longer. I don't need an apology. I don't need them to reform. I don't need anything of them other than I turn it over to that higher power and trust that that higher power can take care of it. I'm done. I am absolutely done trying to manage it through all of these negative energy cords, because that was always kind of the point subconsciously of the negative energy cords was how to manage this. And you want to just be clear with yourself. I am done managing it. I'm done. Turn it over to the higher power because I'm ready for freedom and healing. I'm ready for that peace and abundance in my life. So I completely let go of this. And again, it's for your highest good. So if there's any subconscious fears that, oh, when I let go of managing this, when I let go of these negative energy cords, that means that somehow this other person is going to harm me. You have to let go of that and know, no, this is for my greatest good. So whatever that means, that that alone will happen. I am safe. I am whole. I am complete. I turn it over to a higher power. So if you can manage that, it's very, very helpful. Okay. But again, if you find that challenging, then just it will still the exercise will still work for you. Just practice letting go of the negative energy cord. Because if you do that every day, you'll get better at it. So there you have it. Do these two things at least once a day, every day. If you can do them twice a day, it's even better. But if not, just do it once a day. Don't make it a big thing where you feel like you have to get to the just right feeling and you've got to do it for hours and hours, because then it won't be sustainable for you and then you won't get the results. But just do it for like 30 seconds. And if you do it for 30 seconds every day, it's just a small thing in terms of time, but the benefits will be very large over time. And one last thing I'll say about it is that with the negative energy cords, you might have, if you make a list, you might have hundreds of people or events or situations you got negative energy cords with. And then you might say, oh, gee, how am I going to do that every day? Well, don't. Just do with a few, right? So if it takes you 20, 30 seconds per person, then maybe you just practice with 2, 3, or 4 people until you clear those, right? So then it's only maybe 2 minutes a day. And then once you've cleared those negative energy cords with those people, then you'll know, because you'll be totally clear. You won't have any, that won't trigger those negative states for you anymore. Try as you might, right? You think about the person, you try to dredge up the stuff, and there's nothing there. You just totally clear. You feel absolutely neutral or only positive about the person. Then you know, I've cleared the negative energy cords, in which case then you can move on to the next people on your list. So again, don't overwhelm yourself by thinking you've got to do hours and hours and hours of stuff. It's just about being consistent. If you do this little thing every day, it's such a small thing in terms of your time. But if you do this little thing every day, bit by bit, your life will get better. And it doesn't take that much before the amount of betterness, the amount of improvement is quite substantial, where you really start to know it and feel it and see it. Then there'll be a great enhancement of flow in your life, positivity, lots of positive changes will start to happen just from these small, sustainable changes that you have to put into practice every day. That's the key, because if you just say, oh, I heard it and therefore it should work. Nah, it doesn't usually work that way. You have to put it into practice. When you put it into practice, you get the results. So that's all I'm going to say on that today. For those who are here live, I'm happy to stay on for the group coaching. And I'll just say a few final words for people who are watching this on YouTube. Number one, if you're interested in joining these meetings live, you're welcome to do so. And you can get the information to join live if you sign up for my newsletter on my website, joeylott.com. And there's a link that I'll provide in the description on YouTube. Second thing is that I am still offering free introductory coaching calls. If you are interested in that opportunity, you can go to joeylott.com/intro, and I'll also provide a link for that in the description on YouTube. Those are going quickly. So I'm aware that some people are feeling frustrated by that. Practice releasing the frustration. It will give you better results in life. I do understand that it can be somewhat challenging, but I am offering them at a first come, first serve. So I will say also, some people, because of the way that the scheduler presents things, it shows that I have no availability. Sometimes it will show I have no availability at all for months and months and months and months. But what's actually happening is that I only allow people to schedule sessions for up to 2 weeks in advance. And so if there's no availability, it's because all the sessions for the next did I say 2 months? 2 weeks. All the sessions for the next 2 weeks are already booked. But if you come back the next weekday, then new spots will open up. I can't guarantee you'll get them because maybe other people will have already gotten them. But if you do check back regularly, eventually, maybe you will get a spot. There's also a wait list for last minute cancellations and things like that. So if opportunities pop up last minute, I send out an email and it's first come, first serve for that. Well, one more thing is that for those who are interested in learning all of this stuff and putting it into practice in your life, into a sustainable, simple daily routine that will give you optimal results in your life, you may be interested in the Manifesting Truth program, which is a paid program. I'll also provide a link to that in the description on YouTube. I think that covers it, yeah, for now. So thank you, everybody. Blessings to you all. And I'm going to end this recording now.